Refuse what you do not need. Reduce what you do need. Reuse what you consume. Recycle what you cannot refuse, reduce, or reuse, and drop the rest. Through this, I take an immense pleasure in inviting you all to the last phase of the webinar series, Wildlife and Pandemic, the other side of the coin, on our environment, the largest garbage sink, organized by the Oikos Club, PG and Research Department of Zoology and Wildlife Portal of India. We cannot get through a single day without having an impact on world around us. What we do makes a difference and we have to decide what kind of difference we want. Now, I request Ms. Kodi Swaminathan, scuba diver, conservationist, to introduce the guest speaker of today's session.
Good afternoon to everyone present. I'm Kodai. I conducted the second session, Wilderness Beneath the Waves. Today, I am glad and pleasure to introduce Ms. Pranita, who's a co-worker in WPI. She's a close friend of mine who's pursuing her master's degree in wildlife science and management. She rescues and rehabilitates urban wildlife and domestic animals with the help of forest department. And she is also a resource person for conservation awareness for kids in Mysore Amateur Naturalist. It is an organization that works to reconnect kids back with nature. Her own goal is to focus on man-animal conflict and illegal trade. Other than that, she's a very special person who loves to take amazing webinars.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Ms. Pranita, wildlife rehabilitator, environmental educator, and a wildlife science student to take over the session.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to the management of Lady Doak University, and thank you, Kodai, for that introduction. So today my topic is the environment, the largest garbage sink. Perfect. So today we are talking about our environment being the largest garbage sink. Now, why do we call it a garbage sink? Because a lot of the raw materials, most of it, in fact, the ones that are not artificially synthesized, we derive them from the environment. Even the ones that are man-made or people-made, even the raw materials for that are extracted from the environment. But sadly, what happens is that all our processed items and the byproducts of the used substances, they all go back into the environment. And today it has become a very, very large reservoir for garbage from all across the world. So it seems very commonplace, right? I mean, we see garbage every day, we throw it and we keep our houses clean. But the impact it has on the planet is much deeper than what meets the eye. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. Probably a little bit of a dry subject. So I have a few videos and I'll try to keep it interesting. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box and I'll answer them at the end of the session. Let's start with what is garbage. So basically, garbage is nothing but waste, right? It's a byproduct of human activity. Anything that is not utilizable to us, anything that we don't find a use for or a purpose for anymore is called garbage, waste, trash, refuse, basically something that's unnecessary for us. It can come from your homes, from industries, from agricultural lands, from your pets, from livestock, from anywhere. Now, what is the impact that this kind of waste is having on the environment? So I'm going to start with individual categories of garbage, and we are going to see how they accumulate in the environment and the impacts that they have. So first, we'll start with household waste. Household waste, everybody is familiar with, right? It comes from our houses. It can be from our kitchens, our bedrooms, our bathrooms, our pets. There are two types of household waste, basically. So one is solid waste and one is liquid waste. So solid waste, again, we categorize it into two different sections. One is the category where all the waste can get decomposed slowly or over time, and it takes a long time. And the other category is where it does not get decomposed and requires a treatment or waste management or recycling of it. And speaking of the solid household waste that degrades, it does not degrade or decompose at the same rate that normal organic matter does. Right? It takes a lot of time. So during this time, what happens is that it releases a lot of toxic substances and it generates methane gas. So methane is, we know that it's one of the greenhouse gases, but what we need to say put stock in is that although carbon is the most abundant greenhouse gas, methane is one of the most efficient greenhouse gases. So it has the capability to increase the warming temperature of the climate more than almost up to 23 times more than what carbon does. Methane is also explosive. And liquid waste. So when we speak of liquid household waste, it is not just what we wash off with our vessels or clothes. It mostly includes sanitation, the water that goes from our bathrooms. Where does it go? I mean, we flush down the excreta, right? Whether it's human excreta, animal excreta, we flush it down. But it moves to the sewers and it is released in natural environments, right? We don't have a specific area where we can store the sanitation. There are certain plants, sanitation plants, but they're not as efficient as we want them to be or as we need them to be. Now, all of this excreta, when it is mixed in water, a certain part of it gets decomposed, right? Plants take up some as organic nutrition and other aquatic microorganisms take up some. But when it accumulates so much over a period of time, it reaches a saturation point. So after that, it just becomes a sewer in itself. The next one is biomedical waste. So biomedical waste is basically any waste that is acquired from the medical industry, whether it's a hospital, a clinic, a diagnostic center. And this is highly problematic because there are two types of contamination that can happen with biomedical waste. So one is contamination of and by pathogens. So what happens is, yeah, sure, we segregate waste, right? I mean, we segregate it as if you see in a hospital or a clinic, you segregate it as cotton and you segregate it as recyclable and non-recyclable, like surgical instruments. But what we don't do in hospitals or clinics or in any medical facility per se is that we don't segregate the smaller categories. Let's say we have cotton swabs that are only used for only used while injecting something. We have cotton swabs that are used to clean off wounds. We have cotton swabs that are then used to clean surgeries. So there are different types of cotton swabs, and this is just an example that I'm giving. And what happens is that when all of these cotton swabs are put into one basket, there is a very, very high risk of the pathogens from different places combining. Now, given that and the dumping in large areas for a very long period of time, what happens is that it creates a perfect habitat for pathogens, right? And it creates a lot of illnesses. The second one is contamination via radioactive materials. Now, most of this is basically from diagnostic centers, whether it's your MRI or X-rays or CT scan. They all have some amount of radioactivity still in them, and these cannot be say particularly removed, so they are just dumped in the process. And as we go further into the presentation, we will see how it affects. But biomedical waste, the biggest impact that it has is desertification, because mixed with medical substances like sterilization substances and medicines and tablets and a lot of body fluids, all of that mixed with whether it is radioactive materials or these pathogen inducing substances, it causes something that is called desertification. So it is when the soil reaches a point where it cannot support any kind of vegetation anymore. And there's no life, there's no support for life to thrive in that place, and that causes desertification, which means that there can be no more life in that place. The next one is electrical waste or e-waste. So all of us are guilty of this, right? I mean, some of us lose our phones or we break our phones. We discard our old DVD players or VC players. We want new televisions and we want music players. But what happens when we don't use them anymore? We throw them out, yes, and some parts of it can be salvaged, whether it's by a recycling company or people who are looking to make money out of it, the small rag pickers. But a majority of this waste is how it is discarded. Like, this is how it is discarded. It's just piled up and up in landfills. And all electronic waste, all electronic gadgets, they all have toxic metals, whether it's lead, mercury, bromine, fluorine, cadmium, they are all toxic. Now, they impact the environment in three ways. So one is soil contamination. In very small quantities, yes, there is a requirement of these minerals for plants when they're processing food. But when it becomes extremely when it accumulates into a large quantity, what happens is that the plants cannot move, right? They cannot move like us. They cannot show symptoms like us. So they end up being less productive. They cannot make food anymore, and this in turn affects the animals that are eating this food. And there is a reduction in the whole soil productivity because there is so much of toxicity, there is so much of metal toxicity that it cannot function as it normally does. And this is also harmful to soil bacteria or other soil microorganisms because everything in the ecosystem is connected, right? If the bacteria or microorganism that is helping the plants in processing their food cannot function anymore, then the plant does not get a part of the required nutrition, and its body is completely filled with these toxic metals. So we don't have plants anymore. We have weak and dying and suffering plants and vegetation. The second thing that happens is water contamination. So there's a process called acidification. So when these metals or when these toxic substances move into the water at a point of time, they accumulate so much that the water becomes acidic. And when the water becomes acidic, oxygen does not reach that point. And then the animals inside over there, or the animals that consume these animals, they all are dead, right? It becomes a very toxic environment, and these animals end up dying. The third thing that happens is biomagnification. So what happens with these toxic metals that are released from electric waste is that they cannot be digested, and they are very easily spread inside the water. So when an algae, or when let's say a microorganism or a plankton, it absorbs this nutrition, it considers it nutrition because there is no specific way of filtering it out. Like they have evolved, for example, marine animals have evolved to filter out excess soil, but the waste that we are introducing, the substances that we are introducing, they have not yet evolved mechanisms to defy those. So what they do is, along with the food that they're eating or processing, these substances also go into their body. And because they cannot be digested, what happens is that it stays in their body. And when a bigger animal, a predator of this species, eats this animal, it, along with whatever toxic substance was present in this body, the toxic substance in the water around it is also ingested. Now this keeps increasing, and it moves to the largest predator, or it moves to the largest species in that particular food chain of a habitat, and it reaches a saturation point. So when there is so much of a toxic metal concentration in an animal's body, it does not survive. It cannot survive anymore. So that is what electrical waste is doing. Next, we have plastic waste. This is fairly common, right? I mean, everybody knows. So I'm going to start with plastic was actually created accidentally. So there was a scientist and a researcher called Leo Baekeland, and he was trying to find an alternative for shellac. And I'm sure you know, because you're zoology students, shellac is a product that is obtained and processed from lac beetles. It is used to varnish furnitures as well as glazing on food like donuts and as such. And he mixed phenol, and phenol is a byproduct, is a waste product of coal. So that was mixed accidentally, and he heated it, resulting in the development or the creation of plastic. Now, plastic, one, it releases toxic substances into the soil when it is burnt, right? I'll come to that later when we're talking about the bigger aspects of how garbage impacts the environment on a whole. The second thing is plastic takes a very long time to decompose, and there's entanglement and there's drowning, and we've seen all that. But one thing that is quite a recent discovery in the past few years is that plastic reduces the reproductive success or the reproductive rates, or the gametes inside an organism are affected because of plastic. Now, how does that happen? So when plastic is burnt, or when it becomes microplastic, a lot of its components get leached into the soil or water. And when this is ingested, these substances, it's called dioxin, they interact, they act as endocrine disrupting substances, and they are what you call as environmentally persistent products. That is, they don't decompose or degrade very soon. So when they enter the bloodstream, what they do is they it's called oxidative tissue damage. So there's a lot of tissue damage, and they mimic steroid hormones. By mimicking steroid hormones, they're reducing the functioning and formation of gametes, and thereby reducing the reproductive success of animals. And the last one is biomagnification. Biomagnification, as we spoke about, all the small plastics in the small animals aggregate, and they form larger groups in larger animals until it reaches an animal's system where it cannot take it anymore. The next one is agricultural waste and residues. So what does it include, right? Agriculture waste, your fertilizers, pesticides, yes, and agro-industrial products. These are chemical substances that are used to keep weeds away or pests away. But what it also includes is livestock waste, whether it is dung or carcass or medically, what do you say? There is medicine in the flesh of these livestock, like cattle, and there's goats and there's sheep, and all of these have adverse impacts on the environment. So there are two types of effects that these agricultural residues cause. So one is a direct effect, so poisoning, right? So when we all know the story of diclofenac. If you haven't heard, diclofenac was a medicine that was used to inject cows with, but when they died, these medicines still remained in their flesh, and vultures, being scavengers, they used to feed on these carcasses, and in about just a few years, half of their population was wiped out. So this is how it kills local wildlife. And the second direct effect is that it contaminates drinking water because it poisons the drinking water as well. The second one is something called a downstream effect, such as dead zones. Now, what are dead zones? So when you have an agricultural land and there is regular use of pesticides and insecticides and all sorts of chemicals or weed killers or pest killers, they all eventually move to the groundwater or move into adjacent water bodies. Now, when this accumulates, they get concentrated in a particular area and they take up all the oxygen in that part of the water body. Thereby, there is no productivity. The plankton cannot survive, and if plankton cannot survive, they cannot release oxygen. So there is absolutely, it becomes dead, right? There's absolutely no life, it becomes dead. That is what is called a dead zone. I will show you a video in the next slide of how that works. The third thing that happens here is soil degradation. So the first one is salting. Salting means the salinity of the soil increases to such an extent that it becomes poisonous. Now, we all know how osmosis works, right? So when there is excess of soil around, when there is excess of salt around a life form or a cell, water from that cell moves out and the cell shrinks. Now imagine this happening on a larger scale. That is how salinity kills plants. The second thing is waterlogging. Now how is the soil structure? We have humus, we have the topsoil, subsoil, the parent bed, and the bedrock. And what waterlogging does is the upper part, it becomes congested, right? The pores get closed. It's usually permeable. That is, water can move through the soil and it gets permeated into the underground part of it. But because of these pesticides and livestock residue runoff, what happens is that water becomes clogged. Like how pores get clogged, water also becomes clogged, and the soil cannot permeate water anymore, and it becomes sort of like flooding. And when there is local flooding in that sense, plants cannot survive anymore. Like they cannot take the nutrients that they want from the soil, and that reduces the productivity of the soil as a whole. The next is loss of fertility, change in soil acidity, because a lot of these chemicals that we use, they don't take in, they are built to kill, right? They're built to kill weeds, they're built to kill pests, they're built to block the internal functioning of a pest organism. And what they don't realize is that it does the same thing to the soil. It does the same thing to the soil microorganisms. So either the soil becomes too acidic or it becomes too basic, and it also leads to erosion of the topsoil. And the topsoil, we know, is the most productive part of the soil layer, right? Once there is erosion of the topsoil, there is absolutely no way that plants can survive in that area, and it eventually leads to desertification or soil degradation. So this is a dead zone.
Many forms. Industrial, agricultural, and urban waste also sweep into the sea, fueling explosions of algae that rob marine ecosystems of the oxygen they need to survive. With sustained pollution, these areas become dead zones, which already exist in more than 400 locations across the globe. But nutrient pollution can be managed through change in major contributing.
Yeah. So what you saw here was what I was theoretically telling you. So a dead zone creates a lack of oxygen and animals cannot survive in that area. The last one is industrial waste. We know a lot of industries have come up, and we also have a revolution, the industrial revolution. The climate change and global warming began during this industrial revolution period. And there are different types of ways in which industries can pollute. One is water pollution, of course, because the amount of chemicals and the toxic substances that are released, they all leach out into the environment around them, whether it is into the underground water of soil, whether it is to the surface water. All of them leach out and they cause implications as we have discussed just now. Land pollution by landfills, and there is no waste management. So what happens when there is an increasing amount of landfills? I will come to that in the next slide. Soil pollution, of course, by radioactive substance leaching, that we discussed as well. There's air pollution, acid rain, and respiratory diseases. So when there is an increased amount of toxic substances in the air, it produces something called acid rain. And there is also a chance of increased respiratory diseases, whether it is asthma or lung compression, and as such. And for humans, it's easier than wild animals, or the environment has it, right? I mean, we have some symptoms and we go to the doctor, but the animals cannot do that. What is a waste cycle? So we have spoken so much about how these wastes are accumulating and how they're impacting, but how exactly is it happening? That is called the waste cycle. So basically you're extracting all the raw materials from the environment. It undergoes processing, manufacturing, distribution, use, and disposal. But in each of these steps, there is at least 1/3 of the products that are becoming byproducts or are becoming waste products that cannot be taken into the next step. So when you're disposing it, it comes off as completely opposite to what you have acquired from the environment. Now, let's talk about the larger impacts of environmental waste. One, uncontrolled open dumping. It leads to desertification, as we have talked about, and degradation of land resources. So degradation means that, as we've already discussed, it cannot create any more life. Life cannot thrive, life cannot be built, plants cannot make their food, animals that depend on these plants cannot find food either. The second one is contamination of surface and groundwater supplies, and then open burning of waste. Again, a lot of the waste that we discard, it consists of plastic. In some form or another, it has plastic, and burning of plastic causes dioxin release, which so dioxin, what it does is, in animals there is fatty tissue, so dioxin persists in the fatty tissue and it messes with your developmental system, it reduces your immune system, it reduces the functioning of your reproductive system, and over time it has known to make organisms sterile as well. At a global level, the uncontrolled release of methane is a byproduct. Now, we know that transportation releases a lot of carbon, but what we need to put stock into is that methane is one of the most efficient greenhouse gases. And who are the largest producers of methane? It's the livestock industry. So the amount of land that is cleared for livestock industries, the amount of waste that is produced by the livestock industry, and the amount of methane gas that this livestock waste produces is almost 25 times greater. And that is what we need to be looking into. The potential for transporting pathogens. Now, when there is no treatment, like let's say in your house, you have kept a dustbin for about a week, and you can see maybe even 3 or 4 days, and you can see there are a lot of flies and there are maggots. Now, imagine that happening on a larger scale. Imagine that happening in areas where there is land and when there is water, and both of these resources are mixed. And imagine this with a long time period. That is the number of pathogens, and that millions of types of pathogens that are being transported. We are creating a system of pathogens to be released into the environment. So this is the open burning of landfills. It is never a good idea, because burning, along with releasing toxic substances, there's no complete burning. It also releases something that is called black carbon, and black carbon is 100 times worse than normal carbon or carbon dioxide. And what happens with black carbon is that they don't escape to the outer surface of the atmosphere. They stay below because they're so minute in size, and they all come back to the land, or they remain suspended in the air. And this leads to respiratory problems and air pollution as well. Now, this is waste. So what happens here is, if you have a pond or if you have a drainage system where you cannot treat the waste, it creates a perfect habitat for pathogens. But along with creating it, it seeps into the groundwater, right? And it moves into adjacent water bodies. Now, that is just a way, so it is like building a path for these pathogens to spread. Effects on terrestrial ecosystems. So how is garbage, how is waste affecting terrestrial ecosystems? One is bacteria and insects. Overflowing garbage, we've already spoken that they're the ideal breeding ground. But what we don't know is that it's not visible in a day or two. It's not even visible in a month or two, or maybe not even in 6 months. But we have shared spaces with the environment, we have shared spaces with wildlife. And when wild animals are increasingly coming to garbage, they carry a lot of pathogens. Now, these pathogens that they find in the garbage, it affects them internally, which is not immediately visible, but also when they go back into their habitats or their ecosystems, what happens is that they spread it to that environment. The second one is habitat alteration. Now, this is very important because we all know that the soil or water needs sunlight, right, to be productive. But when the landfills are created into mountains or piles of garbage, and there is so much of chemicals mixed in the soil, the sunlight cannot penetrate into the soil or water. Now, this causes a reduction of oxygen levels, and obviously it leads to the death of a lot of species of microorganisms and vegetation loss. Next is air pollution again. So air pollution does not just include carbon dioxide and methane, it also talks about nitrous oxide and decomposing or liquid waste. Now, what happens with liquid waste is that eventually they start to smell a lot. And that is because decomposition is not happening as it normally should. And that causes several diseases. Garbage contaminates surface water. Okay, so we have these areas where wild animals come into urban areas, one, because of encroachment. We have left absolutely no space for wildlife to thrive. So we have a lot of conflict, as Nishant has already told us in the morning. But when they drink the same water that is contaminated or that has sanitation waste that is discharged from urban areas, they are susceptible to infections. Now, what happens, I'm just going to give a small comparison. What happens with feral dogs and cats is that they're already used to this kind of water. They're used to this kind of waste. They have adapted, and even humans have. And humans have symptoms, and we immediately say there is an onset of a pandemic or an epidemic. But in animals, we don't usually get to know until half of the population is wiped out. Right, it causes, they're susceptible to infections and intestinal blockages, and by the time it is studied, there has to be a significant number of deaths for someone to say, hey, these animals are dying, and they're dying at a very fast rate. Like, what is happening? What is wrong? What do we do about it? So by the time they take an animal, do a post-mortem, study it, research it, and come up with a solution, we've lost so much of the population already. And next is direct contact. So when animals are in garbage dumps or polluted water, it's not always that they're going to be all clean, right? Because we know animals fight, they have territorial fights, they have fights for mates, and even while playing around, or they may be cut by a thorn. Now, these are some open wounds that pathogens find very adaptable. They find it a really good climate to breed in. Now, these pathogens can also enter the animal's bloodstream via that, and when they carry it into their own ecosystems, it spreads to other species as well. So sometimes the infections that animals carry from cities and human garbage is not just intraspecific, it is interspecific, whether through predation or just by being a communicable disease. We're going to see individual effects on animals. So reptiles. Reptiles, we know, are cold-blooded animals, right? They cannot regulate their own temperature. So when the temperature is not right and they want heat, what they do is they find plastic bottles or tin cans, and these objects, they carry a lot of heat. Right? If you keep we all know this, right? If you take a tin can out in the sun or a plastic bottle and you keep it out for a while, the inside of it stays hot. Now, these animals move into them to regulate their temperature, to bask in that. But what happens is that they cannot come out. or maybe they're trying to escape from a predator. And if you've seen snake rescues, the ideal way is to capture them is by the pipe and bag method, because snakes or any other reptile for that matter, they move into closed spaces because they believe that it is safe. But garbage is never safe. They move in, but they cannot come out. Some of them die because of starvation, because they cannot get out and try to feed. Some of them die because of overheating, because obviously when they can't regulate their own temperature, the body becomes so overheated that it cannot take it anymore. And they die because of a heat stroke or an overheating. The second thing that happens with reptiles is garbage getting stuck on any part of their body, whether a leg or a part of a snake's body. And when this happens, it's pretty obvious, right? It happens with humans also. If you have something on your hand or your leg or your face stuck, your movement is hindered. And when this movement is hindered, if they find themselves in the middle of a road, in the middle of a human settlement, the first thing that happens to them is they either lose a limb, they either lose a part of their body, or they die. The second, the last point is ingestion of poisoned or pathogen-ridden prey. Now, we feel that wildlife is only in forests or in the sea, but wildlife is everywhere. It's in cities, it's in your homes, it's outside your homes, it's your garden. And most of the prey for reptiles in urban areas are rodents. And for geckos and lizards, it can be arthropods like cockroaches. But what happens with these urban pests like rodents and cockroaches is that they don't have a very healthy diet. They have adapted to feeding on whatever they find is accessible. And sometimes they can be poisoned, and eating that poisoned prey can lead to these animals getting poisoned due to biomagnification. And in other cases, what these animals eat is not necessarily healthy for what the reptiles eat, because these are wild animals. They have not developed or they have not adapted digestive systems that can function with the kind of food that these animals eat, whether it is from the garbage bin inside your house, or whether it is the sewer pathways that they eat and walk around in, or an attic or storage space in your house. And this causes internal digestive infections on reptiles. The next one is the effect on birds. So two very important things here I would like to say. One is fishing lines, discarded fishing lines, and the second is kite strings. So discarded fishing lines, so people usually fish and they forget about it. For them, it's just a piece of wire or a piece of hook, and they don't really think that it can cause an issue. But what happens is these fishing lines or these fishing hooks, they get entangled in bird claws, in bird faces, on their beaks, and this leads to them not being able to hunt, or this leads to them being able to be caught way too easily. And they also suffer from lead poisoning due to biomagnification again. Now, this is a huge problem. You can see how it moves from one species to another. And so you have these small lead fishing weights. So when someone's fishing, they use these weights to make sure that the animals don't escape, the fish don't escape. But sometimes the birds ingest them. And when they swallow that, it leads to blockages inside, or it can lead to lead poisoning inside, and that also causes their death. Again, plastic litter, it can get wrapped around their legs, wings, their beaks, and any part of a body for a wild animal. If it is not functionable, if it cannot use it to its full potential, it means certain death for the animal. And in very rare cases, yes, maybe an animal can survive. If it is four-limbed, it can survive with three limbs. But if it cannot eat, or if it cannot escape from predators or any other type of threat, that is the problem over here. And sometimes what happens is it's fairly common. Okay, right now there are a lot of reports saying that in nests we found nets, we found meshes, we found plastic substances, and we already know the impact of let's say broken down plastic particles. We already know how that can cause an impact, or how that can threaten the future of the next generations. Now, microparticles of plastic, when they are ingested, what happens is these microplastics, when the heat is way too much, or when the pH varies, they start breaking down. Microplastics again break down into smaller components, and if it enters the internal system, if it enters the bloodstream, it again leads to low immune system, and this jeopardizes all of the next generations, because they cannot give birth. And even if they give birth, the animals, the next generation, the chicks or the fledglings, they become extremely weak and they cannot reproduce. So this is how the populations are being threatened. And the more obvious reason is one, ingestion of plastics. So when an animal, even when we have an alien object inside our body, we call it food poisoning, or we have surgical methods to remove it because we have a stomachache. But how are these animals going to tell us that they have a stomachache, or they're not able to eat, or they cannot, or we know that birds migrate, so they need a fat deposition, they need oil deposition, and all of these processes are hindered because the body cannot function properly. The hormones do not get released, there is a blockage, and they are susceptible to climate change. Not even climate change, they're susceptible to very minute weather changes. So I'm just going to show this. So this is a small video.
This is a dead flesh-footed shearwater. What you're about to see may make you feel sick to the stomach. But if you care about your own health and you like the odd bit of seafood, this is essential viewing. 175 pieces of plastic, including bottle tops, balloon ties, and a doll's arm.
So what you saw in this video was a shearwater. It's an aquatic fish that feeds on, sorry, it's an aquatic bird that feeds on fish and other aquatic organisms. And it had 175 pieces of plastic in its stomach. Now you can imagine the amount of blockage that it causes. You can imagine the amount of toxicity that it produces inside the body. And this is not just from plastic bottles or cans. What you need to observe over here is that they had a part of balloons. So we think balloons are harmless, but they're not. On mammals. Now, the most common effect that plastic or any garbage has on mammals is that they get stuck in their faces. Now, why do wild animals, we can ask this question, right? Like, why do wild animals put their heads into these plastic cans? Now, the reason is that we have already taken up so much of their resources, whether it is food, whether it is a foraging space, a hiding space, a mating space, any place that they feel safe, humans are already there. So what are they going to do to survive? They have to learn how to adapt, and they move into these garbage dumps or these landfills, and this finding easy food rather, is the reason that this happens. They get caught, and when it's on the face, they starve or they suffocate because they cannot breathe. But when it's on a different part of their body, it again leads to cuts and infections and wounds and communicable diseases, and some of them are ridden with maggots. And if we don't see it, if we don't catch it fast enough, there is a very, very high chance that it can spread to other animals as well. Now, in urban areas, so the basic instinct of survival is to find what is easy, what is accessible, right? That is what animals always do. And now when you have so much of garbage on the streets and you have so much of leftovers to feed on, that is where animals will come. And this interferes with digestion, like Nishant was talking today morning, that a lot of people had fed this monkey and it led to it being obese. So like that, this interferes with digestion, they become contaminated with microorganisms. There's several infections, and a lot of it is not visible on the skin. Like some internal issues are visible on the skin as patches or scabies or mange like we see in dogs, but most of the times it is not, and it leads to food poisoning. And wild animals that get used to getting free food, they don't hunt for themselves anymore. That has a species level problem, and that has an ecological level of problem. The species level issue is that these animals, the processed food that we give them, even if it is just fruits, these fruits that we have, they're not completely organic. They all have some amount of injections or pesticides in them that the farmers have used, or that anybody growing these plants have used. And this on a species level is very, very dangerous for them, because their digestive systems are not meant to be eating them. On an ecological level, monkeys and birds, they are pollinators, which means that when they eat the fruit or the seed of a certain plant, they, through their feces, when they move around, they help in propagating these plants to different areas, thereby protecting the survival of the future generations of those plants. But once these guys get free food over here, the plants over there get endangered, and the entire ecosystem in turn gets endangered. And there are some plants which can only be propagated by parakeets. So we know that parakeets eat seeds, right? So now these seeds that they eat, they have a protective covering on them. And when the parakeets eat them, they have certain digestive acids inside their stomachs, which remove that protective covering. And via their excretion or via their feces, these seeds can be propagated or sown in different places. But now if these birds are not eating those and they're getting good fruits or they're just getting easy garbage food, that obviously endangers that species of plant. Effects on marine ecosystems. So habitat impacts, again, there is habitat alteration like what we saw in landfills. So if there is trash and debris accumulation, the sunlight cannot reach, there is no oxygen for the planktons to make food, and if there is no oxygen, there is no further food for other animals, and this causes a decline in a lot of marine species. The second is chemical impact. So we have something called persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic substances. In short, they are called PBT. These are the substances that do not decompose, they do not degrade, they can move easily from one part of the ecosystem to another, and they are very, very poisonous. They're extremely toxic to the animals and the water body. They bioaccumulate and they magnify. So they don't just accumulate, right? Bioaccumulation is just aggregating, is just becoming a collection, but biomagnification is that they become more. That with every increasing organism, whatever has collected becomes more, and more, and that leads to the death of a lot of animals. So this is just a short clip of seals, lion seals being, yeah. Just give me 1 second. I'm not sure why there's a problem. Okay, so I will come back to that. Sorry about that. I think there's a slight problem with the playing. The third one is biological impacts. So we already know that when you ingest plastic, what happens when plastic gets entangled, what happens, and what are the toxic threats. Problems associated with that are internal and external both, but it also, so when plastic is stuck, whether inside of a body or outside of a body, it hinders the feeding capacity of animals. So here you can see that a rubber band is stuck on a fish. We don't know if it's on the gills, if it's hindering its respiratory process, if it is clotting the blood. And here you can see ghost. So I'm sure that Kodai would have covered this topic, ghost fishing. So what happens is that a lot of nets are discarded in the water and they're not clearly visible to these animals and they get entangled in it. So that is what ghost fishing means, as you can see in that picture. Coming to garbage, all of this, all of the things that we've learned till now, it brings us to a garbage footprint. A garbage footprint is similar to a carbon footprint, and it represents the amount of waste that we are leaving in the environment. It represents the amount of waste that we are throwing out that is causing an impact in the environment. And of all the garbage in the world, of all the trash that is thrown out in the world, just 1/3 of it is organic, which means it can be decomposed. And the remaining 2/3 of it is not. It cannot be decomposed, it cannot be digested. And this includes paper and cardboard and packing tape, and you have construction materials and house renovation materials and plastic, industrial waste. These form the majority of the waste that we are producing. Now, in the pandemic, now we have learned so much, right? Garbage does this, garbage does that, and it creates a breeding ground for pathogens and it creates a breeding ground for bacteria and viruses. But have we learned from this? Because if you can see the pollution that we have caused during the pandemic, whether in form of PPE kits or syringes or medical equipments and appliances or masks and gloves, there's so much of it. Right, and like Nishant was saying in the morning, an average person uses about 2 masks per day, and if it's a medical professional, it's more than that. And we have vials, we have so many medicines that are being tried out. Where is all this going? All of this goes back into the environment. So are we back to square one? Have we learned anything at all from this pandemic? Maybe time will tell. Now, what can we do? What can we do to reduce our impact? Let's see the government policies. On a policy and administration level, the first thing that the government has done is it has banned the use of any plastic below 50 microns. Now, you can ask, like, but above 50 microns is thicker, right? Won't it be more harmful to the environment? But the reason that they did this was below 50 microns, the plastics are cheaper, they're easier to use, and they're thinner, which means they cannot be reused. So above 50 microns, they can be reused, and people are not going to throw them off that easily because they're also a little bit more expensive. And there has been a complete ban on plastic sachets for shampoos or tobacco products and pan masala, but I mean, obviously, we're seeing that it's not completely enforced. The second thing is government services. So one is pickup trucks, where individuals don't have to throw their own waste outside into garbage dumps or made up landfills. They can go through a proper system. So that is why garbage pickup trucks are employed. And the other one is a waste management plant. Now, these plants are used to segregate. I mean, it's easier if people did it, if people just segregated their waste before throwing them. But since that doesn't happen on a large scale, there are some waste management plants, although not very functional and not very effective. There's a very, very long way for this to go. But I think some organizations are picking up the strides for this. The government has announced the National Solar Mission a few years ago, and this is the objective of this mission. They want to convert India into a solar energy, what do you say, power, global leader in solar energy. And instead of using electricity, instead of generating so much waste from all the processes that are involved, the National Solar Mission wants to make the country a green, renewable energy hub. So they want to convert India into a solar energy power global leader in solar energy. And instead of using Hi, am I audible? Koday?
Yes, you are.
Okay, yeah.
You're audible.
Yeah, sorry, I think I disconnected for just a second. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is about the National Solar Mission. Then we have the National Bioenergy Mission. Now, what is this bioenergy mission? Do you know what biomass is? Biomass is basically biological mass. So the waste that comes from livestock and it comes from basically living organisms. Now, what this hi, are you still there?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. There's some network issue. Okay, so we're almost at the end of it. So what this bioenergy mission does is that it improves the energy efficiency. So instead of using traditional methods, they want to use more scientific methods and make it reusable and efficient. And they also want to use a biomass resource atlas to gather all the waste that is coming from living organisms, and they will map it, and then they will convert it into an energy producing system. The second thing is price incentives. So in US, Germany, Belgium, Austria, there are these price incentives that are given to people. So if you throw plastic bottles, or if you give them plastic, you are paid a certain amount. In India too, we have that. I'm not sure what they're called in Tamil, but we generally call them kabadi walas. They collect the waste from your house and you get paid some amount for it. But what can we do individually? I mean, policy and administration, of course, yes, and we will follow it. But individually, there are so many different things that we can do. So the first thing is to reduce and reuse plastic. Reduce your plastic consumption. Always look for alternatives. If you're going out or if you're getting a parcel home, do not use plastic boxes. What you can do is carry your own boxes, whether it's a Tupperware or a steel box or a plate. And please don't use straws. We have bamboo straws, and I don't really think that that's necessary anyway. But these are some alternatives. And instead of plastic bags, you can use cloth bags. The clothes that you don't use, they can be stitched up into bags, or the old jeans that you don't use, they can be stitched into bags and you can use them. Segregating waste. So there are 5 different categories of waste. So we have metal for red, organic for gray, green for glass, and blue for paper, and we have yellow for plastic. So what this does is that when you segregate these wastes, it's easier to recycle them, or it's easier to dispose of them in a scientific manner. So always segregate your waste. The next one, we know reduce, reuse, recycle, but there are three patterns that this happens in. So the linear one is just you take the raw materials, you process it, you consume it, and you throw. That builds the most amount of garbage. Now recycling, so you take it, you process it, you use it, and then you recycle, but then again you throw it. That reduces it. But what the circular process of the 3 Rs does is that you recycle it, you reuse it, and then you also repair it, right? So once it's not working anymore, you find another use for it, or you repair it again so that it becomes functional once more. So that has known to reduce the amount of garbage produced by about 90 to 92%. Purchase wisely. Whenever you're purchasing, please do not, you always have to be conscious. You do not have to pick up things that you can throw later. Pick up things or buy things that can be recycled, whether it's packaging. And it's ideal to not buy things that are already packaged, because we have wholesale stores, and that would be a better way to do it. Buy second-hand items. A lot of people don't like buying second-hand items, although it is the best way to reduce our waste. But if you don't like to buy second-hand items, what you can do is buy from your local vendors, buy from local communities that do not have fancy packaging, that do not have fancy manufacturing methods. And the items that you don't use, you can always donate them. So instead of throwing them, you can maybe repair them a little bit, clean them up a little bit, and try to donate them as much as possible. Shop from local markets. So instead of going to a big mart or a big mall, shop from local markets. This way you are supporting your local communities, you're supporting communities that are struggling to survive, but you are also reducing your garbage footprint. And buy in bulk. So instead of just buying 1 or 2 of each product, what you can do is you can buy in bulk, and that reduces the packaging as a whole. So that's about what we can do individually, and the impact that the garbage has on the environment.
I thank Ms. Pranita for the interesting and informative session. Thank you, ma'am, for making us aware of what is going on around us, and we will ensure that we'll reduce the amount of wastage that we have done till date.